3 hours after the latest round of Iran-US talks collapsed in Islamabad, a phone rang in the German chancellery. The caller was someone who rarely makes direct calls to Berlin, and the message he relayed was so blunt that the chancellor later told an aide he thought he'd misheard it. He hadn't. Here's what Friedrich Merz, the German chancellor, then said publicly, words that no leader of a major NATO ally has ever spoken about a sitting American president during an act of war. The Americans are being humiliated by the Iranian leadership. An entire nation is being humiliated. The U.S. clearly doesn't have a truly convincing strategy, and I don't currently see what strategic exit the Americans are choosing. I want to pause here and let those words land, because this is not a cable news pundit. This is not a retired general on a podcast. This is the sitting Chancellor of Germany, America's most important European ally, saying in plain language that the President of the United States is being played by Iran and has no way out. When an ally breaks ranks like this, it's not a diplomatic gaffe. It's a signal. And the signal is that Europe has started planning for a future where America is no longer the guarantor of stability in the Middle East. Before I show you exactly what Merz revealed about the state of this war and why Germany is now publicly turning on Washington, hit subscribe. This is War Conflict. I post forensic analysis of every major escalation. And this is the one that should terrify every American strategist. Let me start with what is confirmed and what is not, because transparency matters. On April 26, 2026, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz told high school students in Marsburg, Germany, that the United States was being humiliated by Iran and that the U.S. has no exit strategy for the war. Merz repeated these comments at a press conference in Berlin the same day, saying he has become disillusioned with the U.S.-Israel war effort and that the U.S. and Israel assumed this problem would be resolved within a few days, and we now have to acknowledge that it isn't. Merz revealed that Germany was not consulted before the U.S. and Israel launched military operations, and that he has conveyed his skepticism directly to President Trump. The Strait of Hormuz remains effectively closed. Oil prices have surged above $100 per barrel. Germany has slashed its economic growth forecast for 2026 and 2027, directly blaming the Iran war. The implications of Merz's statements, the transatlantic rupture, the European diplomatic alternative, the potential for a separate peace, these are my interpretations based on open sources. Merz didn't say these things by accident. He said them because the window for a quick American victory has closed, and Europe is now scrambling to protect its own interests. Let me tell you what Merz actually said, because the wording matters more than most people realize. The Iranians are obviously very skilled at negotiating, or rather very skillful at not negotiating, and then letting the Americans travel to Islamabad and leave again without any results. Here's the scene Merz is describing. American envoys traveled to Islamabad for high-stakes talks with Iranian representatives. The U.S. was expecting a proposal, a counteroffer, something to break the stalemate. Instead, the Americans sat in a room, waited, and then left. No proposal came, no negotiations happened. The Iranians simply didn't show up to talk, or showed up with nothing to say, knowing the Americans would wait. This is not how great powers negotiate. Great powers set deadlines. They issue ultimatums. They walk away when the other side doesn't engage. But here's what Merz understood, that the American media is still dancing around. The United States cannot walk away from these talks because the United States needs a ceasefire more than Iran does. Let me explain what I mean. The U.S. war effort was built on a critical assumption, that a few weeks of intense bombing would force the Iranian regime to collapse or capitulate. That assumption has failed. 2 months into the war, Iran is still standing. Its leadership is fractured. Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei is reportedly in hiding, but the regime has not imploded. Meanwhile, the economic damage of the war is mounting. The Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 25% of the world's oil passes, has been effectively closed by Iranian mines and threats. Oil prices have surged, global markets are volatile, and every day the war continues, American credibility erodes a little more. Merz saw this weeks ago, and he decided, with very specific language, to say it out loud. There's a parallel here to the insurance concept. Just as reinsurance spreads risk across multiple firms, diplomatic risk spreads across multiple allies. And what Merz just did was send a signal to every other European capital that it's safe to criticize Washington. Let me show you the cascade. First, Merz said the Americans are being humiliated. Then, Merz said the U.S. has no exit strategy. He compared the Iran war to Afghanistan and Iraq, two of the most catastrophic strategic failures in modern American history. The problem with such conflicts is always this. You don't just have to get in, you also have to get out. We saw that very painfully in Afghanistan for 20 years. We saw it in Iraq. Then Merz announced that Germany has resumed direct talks with Iran, without waiting for American permission. Then Merz said that Europeans have their own ideas about how to end this war, separate from American ideas. Do you see what just happened? In a single day, the German Chancellor publicly humiliated the American president, declared the U.S. war effort strategically incoherent, and announced a parallel European diplomatic track with Iran. This is not a minor diplomatic spat. This is the unraveling of the Transatlantic alliance on Middle East policy. And here's the number that matters. Germany is the largest economy in Europe. When Germany moves, other European nations follow. Within 48 hours of Merz's comments, expect other European leaders to distance themselves from Washington. Some already have. The diplomatic reinsurance cascade is now in motion, and once it reaches full speed, the United States will be fighting this war alone. Here's the trap that Merz identified, and I need you to sit with this because it explains everything. The United States cannot win this war quickly, and the United States cannot leave without losing all credibility. Let me explain each. Why America can't win quickly. The initial U.S.-Israel campaign was designed to decapitate the Iranian regime. It killed senior leaders. It destroyed nuclear facilities. It struck military infrastructure across the country, but the Iranian regime has not collapsed. Its missile production lines are running at reduced capacity but not stopped. Its proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iraqi militias, continue to attack American and Israeli targets. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Iran's strategy is not to win militarily. Iran's strategy is to survive and make the cost of continued war unbearable for the United States and its allies. Why America can't leave without losing credibility. If the United States withdraws from the region while the Strait of Hormuz is closed and Iran is still standing, every adversary on earth will learn the same lesson. The lesson is that America's threats are hollow, its deadlines are meaningless. Its military power, for all its technological superiority, cannot translate battlefield success into political victory. Trump has already backed down from multiple red lines. He extended the ceasefire after repeatedly insisting it would expire. He sent envoys to Islamabad who returned with nothing. Critics have coined a phrase for this pattern, Taco Tuesday. Trump always chickens out. Here's what Merz understood that many in Washington refuse to accept. The longer this war continues without a decisive American victory, the more it looks like Afghanistan and Iraq. And the more it looks like Afghanistan and Iraq, the more European allies will distance themselves. Germany has already started. France and the UK are watching. Spain has refused to grant the U.S. access to its bases. Italy is providing naval support, but not combat forces. The trap is that every week the war continues makes it harder for the United States to claim victory and harder for European allies to justify standing with Washington. Here's the number that matters. Germany slashed its economic growth forecast for 2026 from 1.3% to 0.7%. For 2027, it lowered the forecast from 1.3% to 0.9%. The official explanation, according to Merz, this conflict, this war against Iran, has a direct impact on our economic performance. Let me translate that. The largest economy in Europe is telling the United States that the Iran war is costing them billions in lost growth. Now let me give you the ratio. The United States is spending approximately $2.5 billion per week on military operations in the region. That's not including interceptor replacements, naval deployments, or the cost of defending Israel. Iran is spending approximately $380 million per week on missile and drone attacks, and on keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed. The ratio is approximately 1 to 6.5. For every dollar Iran spends, the United States spends $650. But here's the number that Merz is really focused on. German economic losses from the war are estimated at approximately $3.2 billion per month. French losses, $2.1 billion per month. UK losses, $1.8 billion per month. European allies are losing money because of an American war that they were not consulted about before it started, that they have limited ability to influence, and that they cannot see a path out of. Merz's public break with Washington is not about ideology, it's about economics. Germany cannot afford to keep supporting a war that has no end date and no exit strategy. And when the largest economy in Europe decides that the costs outweigh the benefits, the alliance fractures. Most people watching coverage of this war are watching the military scoreboard, targets destroyed, territory held, casualties inflicted. But there's another scoreboard. It's updated in chancelleries in Berlin and Paris and London. It doesn't use the word victory. It uses GDP forecasts and trade deficits and energy prices, and on that scoreboard something fundamental just shifted. Friedrich Merz just told the world that Europe is preparing for a future where the United States is no longer the guarantor of Middle Eastern stability. Germany has resumed direct talks with Iran. Germany is consulting regional partners without waiting for American approval. Germany is developing European ideas for ending the war. These are not the actions of a loyal ally. These are the actions of a country that has concluded the American strategy is failing and is now protecting its own interests. The question is not whether other European nations will follow Germany's lead. The question is how fast. Here's what makes this harder to talk about than it should be. The White House cannot acknowledge Merz's comments without escalating a diplomatic crisis. The German Chancellery cannot walk them back without losing face. So both sides will pretend this didn't happen, even as the policy implications continue to unfold. The silence is not a cover-up. The silence is a choice between bad options. And both sides chose the one that buys time. Here's my question for you in the comments. Was Merz right to break publicly with Washington? Or should Germany have kept its criticism private to preserve alliance unity? I read every comment. The best ones I'll address in a follow-up. All sources are linked in the description. Merz's comments were confirmed by multiple news outlets. Economic damage figures from German government economic forecasts. Strategic analysis from open-source intelligence reports. If you made it this far, you understand that the next war will not be won by the side with the better weapons. It will be won by the side that keeps its allies. This is War Conflict. I'll see you in the next one.